Hi, this is John from Sonic Drive Studio. Welcome to our new channel. If you'd like to stay up to date on our activities such as mix tutorials, plugin reviews, demos, etc., please hit subscribe and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/sonicdrivestudio. So a few days ago we released a new rock track. It's a demo for the new Ownhammer 2x12 orange guitar cab impulse response pack. You can listen to the full demo at the link below. This demo featured Steven Slate Drums 4 with the CLA expansion, and we got some questions about the drum mix, so I thought I'd do a video about this. Let's dive in. First I'm going to play a section of the song for you with all the instruments on. Here we go. So the drums sound really punchy in the mix, they cut through very nicely, and they still sound pretty ambient. Now let's take a listen to the drums soloed. Now let's take a listen to the drums without any processing. Here we go. So there's definitely a big difference. The dry drums do sound very good. I mean, they're processed by Chris Lord Algae after all, but there's still a lot of room for additional processing, and they're very moldable. Now I'm going to show you what I did on these drums to make them sound bigger. Here we go. Let's start off by taking a look at Steven Slate Drums. I'm using version 4 at the moment. Like I said, I'm using the Chris Lord Algae pack, which is really good for rock. I highly recommend checking it out because it's awesome. So the kit pieces that I'm using are the DW24 with the hard beater, the Pearl steel snare, DW toms 10, 12, 14, and 18 inch, Zildjian hi-hat, Zildjian ride, 2 Zildjian crashes, the 18 and the 19 inch. And finally, I used a China from the deluxe set because there isn't any China in the Chris Lord Algae pack. I chose to use a pretty basic setup this time. Sometimes I'll use layering, so I like to combine like 2 kicks and 2 snares to make it sound even bigger, but this time I want it to be a little bit more realistic. I can show you what I did routing wise in the mixer. So all of the kicks are going to one channel. All of the snares are going to another. All of the toms are going to one channel. The hi-hat goes to a separate channel. The China goes to the same channel as the overheads. And the room mics are going to another channel. One thing that I did is turn the faders down about 10 dB each, because otherwise the level of the samples is a bit too loud often. You can also use a trimmer on your channel. That's it for the sampler. Before we take a look at the single channels, I want to show you the virtual tape machines. It's a very magical plugin. I always have it on all my tracks, like I said in one of my previous videos. I highly recommend it if you want to add analog vibe and depth to your tracks. So at the moment, all the inserts are turned off. We can take a listen to the drums with and without the virtual tape machines on. Let's start off with the drums totally dry, so no virtual tape machines. I'm going to turn this off on the master fader as well, because this replicates the behavior of tape more accurately if you have it on the master fader as well. So it's off there and off on all the tracks. Let's listen first without. And now on. So the drums sound so much fatter and more alive with the virtual tape machines enabled. You can really hear the difference. This is why I never want to mix without this plugin again. It always sounds better with it on. I love it. So we're just going to leave the virtual tape machines on from now and start at the single tracks. Let's take a look at the kick. Let's listen to the kick soloed first without the processing enabled, except for the virtual tape machines, of course. Now with the plugins on. So the main difference that I'm hearing here is that with the processing on, it sounds clearer and more defined. And with the processing off, it sounds a bit more woolly and muffled, so to speak. Let's take a look at what we're doing in the virtual mix rack. I also like to use the virtual preamp collection on all my tracks because it adds some nice character. Let's A/B this one real quick. It seems to add a very subtle amount of dimensionality, which is nice. Then on all my tracks I always use the virtual console collection as well. I have it set at the Brit 4K G setting at the moment. It's a bit more flat than the E channel, which I was using before, but at the moment I'm really digging this one. We can do a quick A/B here as well. Now let's A/B the preamp and the virtual channel. I like the character that those add and the coloration. So the EQ on this kick was already very well balanced. I'm not adding a lot of stuff in the FGN here. I'm just cutting some low mids here and also cutting some lows till about 36 Hertz. Let's A/B this EQ. So we're just taking away some muddiness with the mid control here. Just going to boost this so you can hear what frequency I'm cutting. So this is just for some nice, broad and subtle shaping. Then with the custom series equalizer, I'm boosting a little bit of 2K, which adds a little bit more presence to the kick in the mix. Let's A/B. Now let's A/B with the entire mix rack on and off. So that kick already sounds really nice. I've also added some studio EQ here, which is just a basic Cubase equalizer. Let's A/B this one. So that EQ also adds to the overall tightness of the kick by removing some unwanted frequencies. As you can see here, I'm removing some 98 Hertz. With a fairly sharp Q, I'm removing about 5 dBs. And I'm also cutting some 135 Hertz with a Q of 3.7, also about 5 dBs. To me, those frequencies sound a bit tubby and woofy, and I don't want that if I want a really tight kick sound. Funny enough, this can also add to the weight of the kick. You might think that cutting away such frequencies can only take away from the bigness of a kick, but in this case it really helps to make it sound more weighty. I can show you what I'm doing here by boosting the frequency so you can hear what kind of stuff I'm removing better. So the kick really seemed to be resonating in those areas. That's why we're taking it away, because we want the kick to sound punchy and not too boomy. That's it for the kick. And now for the snare. Not a whole lot of processing going on, just the virtual mix rack and the virtual tape machines. Let's take a listen to the snare without the virtual mix rack on. This is a very nice sounding snare. Let's turn this on and let's listen. So with the processing, we're adding some brightness and resonance. Just makes the snare pop a little bit more and it makes it sound a bit more alive. Let's take a look at what we're doing there. So once again, I have the virtual preamp collection on here. Let's A/B this real quick. Again, adding some subtle character and bringing the snare forward a bit more. Very subtle though. Let's do the same thing with the virtual channel. I also like the coloration that one's adding. Let's do a very quick A/B with both of these on and off. Great. Now I've added the FGS here. It's just for the low filter actually. Just filtering out everything under 88 Hertz. We don't need those frequencies. Let's leave that room for the kick and the low toms and the bass guitar and all that. Now I'm using the custom series lift here, which I really like to use on snares and kicks and all drums for that matter. The high lift in the present setting really adds something to a snare. If you haven't tried this on your snare, please try it because it sounds awesome. The punchy setting on the low lift really helps to bring some bottom to the snare. Let's take a listen and A/B this one. If you want to add even more punch, you can just turn this up. Let's listen what it sounds like if I boost this. I really love how natural that sounds. This must be one of my favorite EQs, and it only has a few buttons. And then finally we have the FG401 here, which is compressing the snare a little bit. I took the snare long decay preset and tweaked it a little bit from there. Let's take a listen and A/B. So that's adding some resonance to the snare. It makes it sound a bit longer. The mix knob is set at 32%, which helps to still keep the transients intact. I've also added the trimmer here to compensate a bit for all the extra dBs that we're getting because of all the boosting. Let's A/B the full rack. So we're not doing a whole lot here, but it's really helping the snare. Then finally what I'm doing here is sending the snare to a reverb track here. That's also going back to the drum bus. Here we have the fractal audio reverb. Let's A/B this one so you can hear what it does to the snare. Adding some room. If you feel like your room mics aren't giving you enough decay or size in your snare, then you can add a reverb like I'm doing here to emphasize the room sound a little bit. Sometimes if you turn the room mics up too high, all the other instruments like the cymbals, the kick or the toms can get emphasized too much. So you can compensate a little bit with adding some more reverb to your snare to make your snare sound even bigger. And now for the toms. Let's listen dry first, and then with the virtual mix rack on. So the toms sound a bit more woolly and dark with the virtual mix rack turned off, and they sound a bit brighter and more intelligible with the mix rack turned on. So we're hearing a bit more of the stick attack and the skins. Let's take a look at what I'm doing here. Again, the virtual preamp collection, FG73. The virtual channel seems to add a little bit more glue, so it's definitely not as subtle as this one. Let's A/B both. Toms seem to pop a little bit more with those turned on. Love it. Then we only have the FGS setup here, boosting some 10K, about 6 dBs actually. This really adds some snap and presence to the toms. And I'm removing some mud here, about 3.5 dBs of about 350 hertz. Also cutting some excess lows. Everything under 60 hertz is cut away. I'm going to leave that room for the kick and the bass guitar. Let's A/B this one. Yeah, I love what this does to toms. I use this on toms very often. Let's A/B the whole rack one more time. So the main goal here is to add some presence and to remove some mud. Pretty simple. I'm not doing anything on the hi-hat except for adding the virtual preamp collection and the virtual channel. I don't want this to be too loud in the mix because the overheads and the room mics are already giving me a lot of hi-hat. So it's very subtle. Sometimes I like to cut away some swooshing mid and low sounds with something like a high-pass filter. And now for the overhead mics. They also don't need a lot of processing because they just sound very good already. Of course, we're adding more processing on the drum bus. Anyway, we can do an A/B of all the inserts that are going on in this channel so you can hear what those do. Mainly just adding some saturation and depth with all the analog simulations. I'm just going to turn this up so you can hear the difference more. So it's just adding some glue, making everything sound a little bit more cohesive. Now, last but not least, the room mics. Those are very important to getting a drum kit to sound big. Let's A/B what we're doing here. So the difference definitely isn't subtle. First, again, let's start off by A/Bing the saturation that is going on in these two units. Just adding some nice color there. Then with the FGN, I'm cutting some lows out under 50 Hertz. We want to leave that room for the close mic kick. That's going to take care of most of the sub lows. Cutting a little bit of highs here, because if you compress the room mics very hard, they can become a bit harsh. And we want to leave a lot of those high frequencies to the overhead mics. That's why I'm cutting some highs here. Let's AB real quick. This brings the focus to the shells a bit more, as opposed to the hi-hat and the cymbals. The custom EQ here is only removing all the high end above 10K. Same reason as we're cutting a little bit of highs here. Let's take a listen. We're just making it sound a bit more gentle and more mid-focused because we're removing some of those high frequencies. Now with the FGS, I'm removing some unwanted mud. Let me AB this for you. A room mic features all of the kit pieces of the drum kit in one channel, so it's really moldable because all of the frequencies are there. You can really tailor the sound here with equalization, removing unwanted frequencies or unwanted mud, or emphasizing certain mid frequencies can help bring out some instruments. Then finally, the blue vintage compressor, which is really great on room mics. Let's take a listen. Turning it off just makes it sound really lifeless compared to when it's turned on. Great unit for room mics. Highly recommend it. And then finally the drum bus. Let's AB what I'm doing here. So this is really adding some glue and punchiness to the drums. Very important to getting that sound and getting the drums to cut out of the mix. First up, we have the blue modern here with the trimmer right after, just cutting some level here because of the boosting that's going on here. And also bomber, which is awesome for adding more presence to your drums. Let's AB the entire rack here. So the blue modern is really good for adding glue and punchiness to your drum bus. Just try it out on circuit 2 with the high pass enabled and the attack set at the slowest and the release at the quickest. I think you're going to love what you'll hear. The bomber is very subtle. We can AB this one so you can hear what it does. So this one helps to make every drum pop out of the speaker and out of the mix a bit more. I have the intensity set quite low, only about 9%. It just helps a little bit. Try it out for yourself to see how it sounds. Then finally, I'm adding FG Gray from the virtual bus compressors. Let's A/B this one. Just adding some final glue just makes it sound a bit more round and punchy overall. Make sure you're careful with the attack settings and the release settings. I like the release quite fast and the attack quite slow on the drum bus. I'm also using the high pass filter so that the low end in the kick remains big and doesn't get squashed too much. Let's do a final A/B with all the plugins on and off so you can hear what we've done here. First, I'm going to leave them all on and play a piece, then I'm going to take them off. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Maybe you've picked up a trick or two on how to process your Steven Slate Chris Lord algae drums to make them sound even bigger. As you can hear, the raw samples sound great, but they can really use some extra processing. Have fun and be creative. And again, please hit subscribe and follow us on facebook.com/Sonic Drive Studio. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.